From a network of highly secure, top secret locations across North America, this is the return of the Spurs Insider podcast. I am your host, Mike Finger, being joined once again, audio only, by Express News beat writers Tom Orsborn, Jeff McDonald, and sports editor Nick Talbot. We are back to talk about your tanking local Cagers who cannot be beaten. Is that a paradox? Is that an enigma? Is that a mystery wrapped in a riddle? Who's to say? But let's get into it. Tom Orsborn, you are in a secure location not too far from me in the Great White North. We will not be more specific than that. But what do you make of what is going on with the 3-1 tanking local Cagers?
Man, just juggernaut. It's just a juggernaut. But seriously, they're playing. Their pace, their aggressiveness. Ever since that opener when they lost to Charlotte, has been excellent. I mean, last night at the Target Center, I mean, as Chris Finch said, they outpunked us in every way possible, and that's pretty much the perfect description for it. Although you wonder, it's just early. It's Minneapolis was playing. I mean, Minnesota was on a back-to-back, but still, I mean, Spurs, what they're doing is impressive. They're playing really hard.
The listeners were up in arms last week, and I mean, at least one or two of them, a huge chunk of our fan base, about us not doing an opening week Spurs Insider podcast. If we would have done it, if we would have gotten our act together and done our first podcast the day after that opening game, how different would that podcast sound than the one we're doing just a few days later? The opening night performance against the Charlotte Hornets, who are not a juggernaut in the Eastern Conference and might end up becoming the tanking Hornets, was one of the more lopsided, one of the more humiliating opening night efforts in the history of the San Antonio Spurs. And, based on that first night, it looked like exactly what everybody expected. This was going to be a brutal year where the Spurs were going to struggle to not just win, but to hang in there with most teams. And then they turn around and Jeff went on the road to Indianapolis and Philadelphia and saw just one of the more dramatic overnight turnarounds we've ever seen. And I know this isn't going to last forever, but Jeff, you can weigh in on what you saw and what to make of these first four games as a whole.
I think, and I made this point before to somebody, maybe not on this podcast, but I think what's going to separate your tanking Spurs this year and many of the tanking teams we've seen in the past is, they've got guys that are going to play hard. They're going to be well organized, and they're going to be competent. And so if you get in a situation where you're playing a team that maybe has a little more talented than you, but isn't well organized and isn't competent right now and maybe isn't fully engaged, they're going to have a chance to win those games. And that's kind of what we saw in what we're seeing on this road trip is they're catching teams that aren't really prepared to play at the pace that they're playing at. Maybe you're overlooking them, maybe just aren't as organized at this point of the season as the Spurs are, which is kind of crazy because this is a totally different Spurs team than we've seen. I mean, the starting lineup is kind of revamped. You've got guys that have not played together. And this is the point I was trying to make in the preseason when you laughed at me, but they seemed way more, besides the opener at Houston in the preseason, all the other games, they seemed way more organized and way more competent and way more, hey, they kind of know what they're doing than I expected at that point of the season. And they're ahead of a lot of the teams they're playing in that regard. And, you hate to drink the Kool-Aid, but you have to give Pop some credit for that.
I think we tend to be sort of prisoners of the moment. And
sure,
the last these three games, you can on the one hand say exactly what you just said, that the Spurs are incredibly well prepared to play some of these teams for a team that's just kind of learning who it is, and that they're going to continue to be competent and organized and all those kinds of things. I don't expect that to continue. I mean, obviously, the
other teams are going to catch up.
They're not going to win 75% of their games. Other teams are going to catch up. And this doesn't make for great podcast hot takes or arguments. I think we're going to find the eventual inevitable middle ground here. Like, the Spurs aren't going to be more competent and play harder than everybody all year. Like, the Spurs do have that competitiveness in their DNA that has been passed down for generations. But like, they're going to hit those. We've seen Spurs teams in recent years that have hit those periods where they can't buy a bucket, they can't win a possession, they can't win a game, and that goes on for like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. Like, that's going to happen eventually, and it's easy to sit here and kind of mock other tanking teams, how they're not nearly as with it as your local Cagers are. I'm not so sure that advantage is going to stay that way all year. Like, this team is going to hit a slump, and it's going to have nights where, like, the players are, or do we really want to be here? That's just natural. And one of those nights was opening night. So like, we're a week removed from them just looking like the worst team in the history of basketball. So again, this isn't exactly a hot take one way or the other. I think the water is going to, I think Manu Ginobili could put this better in terms of reverting to the mean. I think if you look on paper, the way the talent wise, what this team has, track record wise, it's a team that's going to be sort of in a fight to win 30 games, go 30 and 50, somewhere along those lines. But right now, I would just say, for those who are still in love with Victor Wembanyama, who is awesome and is a once in a generation talent. I mean, I saw him in Vegas earlier this month. He's worth dreaming about. Like, don't freak out about a 3-1 start, because it's the losses are going to come eventually if you want the losses. And if you like the wins, enjoy them because they're fun.
Right. My point is that they're going to win 62 games, which is what they're on pace up for. They're not going to win 40 games. But these predictions about the Spurs are going to win 20 and maybe less than 20, and maybe 20 is the over-under, and all these discussions people are having in the preseason, I don't think they're going to be that bad without trying to be that bad. I think that was the point I was trying to make in the preseason, was if they go out to try to win every game they can, I don't think they're going to finish in the bottom three. Now, I'm not saying they are going to do that. There are certainly ways they can get around doing that. There are certain things the front office can do as we approach the trade deadline that can hamstring any chances to do that. I'm just saying, I think this team is probably, I mean, it's good enough to win more than 20 games. I think if you gave me 20, if you told me they were going to win 20 or they were going to win 30, like those are the two numbers, I would say they're way more likely to win 30. And I don't know that 30 is enough to maximize your Wemby chances.
I think the odds before the season began were at what? In Vegas, odds were 22.5 wins. Looks like they're going to be over that now. People who, it's early, went back the last 3 years.
I wouldn't call that a lot. I wouldn't. There's going to be some rough months.
I went back the last 3 years and looked at the teams that went 3-1 to start. Most teams made the playoffs, of course. But if you look at the teams that were, actively maybe not trying to win, I believe we have the Wizards last year. I think they ended up winning 35 games. The year before that, the Sacramento Kings won 31. And the year before that was the shortened season, so they only played 72 games, I believe, and Orlando won 21. So it's not impossible.
Yeah, the next stretch of the schedule will be telling too, because what we saw opening night, I think, and will probably hold for a while, is with a young team, confidence it works both ways. Like, when they're rolling, they look great, but when things are rolling on them, it seems to snowball. And I think that's what we saw against Charlotte. And I think that can work in the macro sense as well, where they've got, the schedule right now is just brutal. They shouldn't be 3-1, to be honest. But the schedule they got coming up, like they don't play another like all the teams they're playing coming up, I look at as playoff teams pretty much until you get to about the end of November.
Correct.
So if that starts going south, I mean, if they lose 2 or 3, they get their butts kicked a couple times. You could see the confidence start to shake a little bit, and that's where you get into a really rough month. So I think we will see some stretches like that. Nobody here is predicting a playoff run. I don't think. I'm just saying this idea that they can just show up, play as hard as they can, and get Wemby. I don't know.
Yeah, the obvious guy to be moved would be Jakob. So you take Jakob off this roster, it's a whole different story.
Jakob probably won't finish on this team.
Yeah.
It's why for those wondering why, like Doug McDermott and Josh Richardson, name your veteran who isn't part of the future, is playing, is because those guys could get moved. A lot of guys could get moved off of this team. And I'm not ready. Like Jeff's sort of taking a victory lap about how this team is not going to be bad enough. The last 3 games have been unbelievably positive signs for how hard this team is going to compete now, how well they're coming together, blah, blah, blah. In one of them, they allowed a team that's competing for one of the worst in the league, in the Indiana Pacers, to score I think it was 70 something points in the fourth quarter. Is that a bit high?
Yeah.
It was 49.
49 points in the fourth quarter after they built a huge lead. The second game of this 3-game winning streak was against the Philadelphia team that just seems to be a total mess right now. And I mean, that's a good win. Your local Cagers outplayed a team that's a legitimate championship contender, but that team is just sort of an absolute mess. And I can't imagine that they walked into that building against the Spurs ready to play. You got to show up. Every game matters. That's true. But I mean, come on. And then the game last night, like the Timberwolves were on the second night of a back-to-back. They did not seem to care much to start out with. Like Chris Finch said, they got punked. But then they went on a little bit of a run in the fourth quarter. It went from 31 or 32 to 13 in kind of a blink.
So we've proven the Spurs are not ready to beat everybody by 30. Okay, you've made your point.
I'm just saying,
not quite good enough to beat everybody by 30. They might have to settle for their humdrum 15-point wins here or there.
The only nit I'm picking here is you still seem to be convinced that if this team continues to try hard and play together, that there's no way it's going to finish in the bottom 3. I still think the bottom 3 is a distinct possibility because they're just not, their talent level isn't there. I mean, it is a bottom 3, bottom 4, bottom 5 talent.
Okay, but now you're putting bottom 4, bottom 5. Now you're moving the goalposts a little.
No, if you're bottom, I'm saying that bottom 3 is a possibility. Like it's if you're a bottom 5 talent team, then bottom 3 is a possibility because of variance. To bring in like poker terms here, like there's injuries, there's ups and downs, there's trading Jakob. Like I still, for people who are out there dreaming of Victor Wembanyama and who think after these first 4 games, oh, there's no way the Spurs are gonna be in the bottom 3 and get that 14% chance to get him. Like, keep heart. Like bottom 3 is still a possibility.
I wouldn't say no way about anything. You're correct. But a big part of that is who they're going to trade before February.
Yeah, that's a really big part of it because you're not just looking at Jakob. You're looking at depth too with McDermott and Josh Richardson. If you take 3 guys out of the rotation, it's a lot.
I was just playing this hypothetical game. If the Spurs don't play the tanking game and everybody else does, they're not going to finish in the bottom 3. Like they're going to have to do some things that facilitate that, and they probably will. It's kind of a thought experiment.
I think you're also being overly dismissive of the other tanking teams, like that they just don't care. Like that Oklahoma City team plays hard. Will Hardy is Coach of the Year candidate already. Our old friend Will Hardy. Like this, the Jazz, who are supposed to be a terrible team, started 3-0.
Yeah, Oklahoma City plays hard, but their second best player is Lou Dort.
Their best player is better than the Spurs' best player.
Yeah, but their best player might not ever play because they've been pretty consistent on that for the last several years. Where if that guy has a hangnail, he's going to miss 40 games, and that's what I'm talking about. The Spurs so far have not shown they will do that with their best player, and maybe they will. But the Thunder have made it clear that they got no qualms sitting their best player for months on end.
Here's a question that Jeff, since you said change tack a little bit, since you said they won't sit their best player, who's been the best player so far this year? Has it been Keldon? Devin? Who would that player be? Jakob?
Yeah, it depends on what you like.
It's a very even distributing team so far. I think how many assists did they have on their field goals yesterday? I think that's 2 or 3 times now they've been over 30.
Yeah, they had 37 last night on 48 makes.
I guess my point is they're going to have a bad record, but they're not going to be hapless.
I think we all agree on that.
All right, let's call it. Let's wrap it. Hell of a podcast.
Anyway, in terms of just basketball itself, if we were talking about a team in which the NBA draft, Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, in which that did not exist, and we were just analyzing basketball, which I realize is not what this podcast has ever been about at all in terms of analyzing basketball. But what do you like and dislike? What are you surprised about in terms of how just the basketball team has played basketball so far?
The obvious one to me is just Devin Vassell's relentless aggressiveness, which I think is what they want from him, what they need from him. But that guy's getting up shots. They're good shots. And just being able to do it when the first night was a disaster for him. 0 of 8 from, your first, you talked all summer about he's got this new role, this new opportunity. He's going to have a bigger load on his shoulders. A lot of people looking his way. Green light, and then he goes 0 for 8 from 3 in the first game. Like that, I'm weak-minded, so I would have been just, I would have backed off after that. I would have shied away. He's kept fighting on the road on this road trip. It's been really, really, really good. And after that first game, he's made almost everything he's taken. Like, you have a lot of confidence in that guy right now, and he's got a lot of confidence in himself.
One of the differences is he's also getting to the line a lot more.
Yeah, he's just attacking the rim like crazy.
Yeah, the biggest thing that stands out to me is they're executing the way they want to execute. They're pace. They're 4th in the league in pace. That's exactly what they want to be. And then last night you throw in a component, something else that they've wanted to see that finally happened last night was Jeremey Sochan being aggressive and going to the basket and getting out on the break and attacking the rim. So that's impressive that they're doing what they set out to do. Their pace is excellent. They're playing strong on defense. So that first unit deserves a lot of credit, I think.
Jeremey Sochan had a better scoring spurt in his 4th game in the NBA than he ever had in college. His career high in college, this top 10 NBA draft pick, was 17 points. Never scored more than 17 points in a game in Baylor. That's just not what he was asked to do. It's kind of the way the draft is now. Like you're drafting on potential, not necessarily on accomplishments. I just found that kind of interesting. And then last night, we're recording this on a Tuesday here in the Great White North. On Monday night against the Minnesota Timberwolves, Jeremey Sochan by the 6-minute mark of the second quarter already had 12 points. He finished with less than 17. He finished with 14. But he was also, he and Jakob Poeltl were matched up against one of the largest, most formidable front courts that the NBA has seen in a long time, in Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. And the Sochan-Poeltl front court won that for one night with the kid who was a sixth man at Baylor starting his 4th NBA game. So that was a definite, like Tom said, a definite sign of optimism, sign of the way this team is coming together early on.
He just fits. Jakob said this last night that he's a lot more comfortable at this point than they expected, and I thought it was telling that Sochan said last night, being asked about facing that front court, 3-time defensive player of the year, Gobert, and all-star in Cat, about being nervous if he still had jitters. And he said, yeah, I've got butterflies in my tummy, but it's about being excited about playing the best. It's not being nervous or, worried about whether he can hold his own or fit in. He's just excited about facing these guys, and he fits in so well. And it was a good decision. No G League for him. Just throw him in the fire and see what he can do.
On that note, like the Spurs are as young in terms of who they're playing, giving minutes to right now. They're also getting younger as we speak. In that last night, baby-faced Isaiah Roby got the minutes that had been going to KBD, I believe. So now in those top two lineups and the top 10 in the rotation, you're starting a 19-year-old Jeremey Sochan. Like Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell aren't exactly graying veterans. I mean, those are what 22, 23-year-old players. Trey Jones starting at point guard. You got 19-year-old Josh Primo coming off the bench. Baby-faced Isaiah Roby in the second unit now. They are committing to a youth movement, and there's just not room. This is segueing into what Tom just mentioned about the G League. One of the news items from this week was Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham heading to start their career in the G League. The Spurs also signed former St. Anthony's high school player, phenom Charles Bassey, who will be part of the G League team. And I don't think there should become any kind of debate here, but this just seems like the natural approach that the Spurs should be taking. Play a bunch of young guys in the NBA games, but then you also want the other young guys who aren't playing to play every day and to learn how to dominate the way that Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, who are playing so well now, once did. I think that should be. I think that's a good move for Blake Wesley, for Branham, for Bassey, for Dominic Barlow, for all of those guys.
Yeah, it would be silly to play. I mean, you can't play all the rookies unless they're just really good and deserve it. You can't play all the rookies, and that's some people seem to want that. Like, just get all 6 of them up there and play them all in the road. That doesn't make any sense. So I think they're doing the right thing.
Like the Wesley Branham path can be the Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell path.
Yeah.
The DeJounte Murray, Derek White path before them. I don't think that they will be down there as long as some of those guys, if you consider that Doug McDermott might not finish the season with the Spurs, that Josh Richardson might not finish the season with the Spurs, that Jakob Poeltl might not finish the season with the Spurs. It all sets up really naturally. And again, this isn't great debate fodder, because I don't really think there's a reasonable other side of the debate. Like, it just seems so obvious that this is the way you do it. You let those guys who aren't getting the big minutes, and what's better, to have to throw them in there for 8-10 minutes a night, right? And let them be overwhelmed against Golden State or whoever, or let them get 30 minutes a night in the G League and build themselves up the way that all those guys we just mentioned once built themselves up. By February or March, bring them back up and get NBA minutes.
Yeah, when you talk about those guys that they drafted in the first round, Branham and Wesley are the type that need a G League. That would, you throw them down there and say, go get 30, go learn to score, go learn the game. Sochan, number one, he's getting minutes in the NBA. He's starting, and he's not the type of guy that I think would benefit from the G League. He's a guy that kind of plays off everybody else. He needs to be around NBA players. Sending Sochan to the G League and telling him, go score 30 doesn't make sense. But the other two, it does to me. Go get your confidence, go learn to score.
And Mike used the word overwhelmed, and that's perfect. That's where they would be right now, whereas Sochan is just totally comfortable.
When I was in Vegas to see Wemby Mania, I don't think we've done a podcast since I went. And I think Jeff might have mentioned this in Jeff or Tom might have dropped this comparison in the early Sochan coverage. But I had somebody tell me out there that the comp, and this was before the punch, that got so much news since then. But I had somebody compare Sochan to Draymond Green, and for him to be that kind of player for the Spurs eventually, not necessarily in attitude, although I do think he's got some personality the way Draymond has personality, but just in terms of, like you guys just mentioned, playing off of other good players, making the people around him better, whether that's passing, whether that's rebounding. I think that some talent evaluators believe that Sochan can eventually be a better shooter than Draymond is. Like, that's the hope. But if that's the type of comp that you have for a player like that, it makes way more sense, like Jeff just said, to have him play around veterans, because that's his skill set, is to make people better. As opposed to, you want like a Blake Wesley or Malachi Branham to go down and learn how to be a lead scorer, to dominate against competition where they can be effective. So I just found that kind of interesting there to hear that comparison, because it sort of makes sense.
Yeah. He can. He's going to shoot better. I think he's shown signs of that, and the assists last night, 4 assists. Yeah, he's just fitting in. That starting five is a very comfortable unit. I think they really play well together, and he's a big part of that.
I will eat a little bit of crow on Trey Jones. I'll say this about him now. Early in his career, I thought this was an organizational, just kind of nice guy to have at the bottom of the roster, just in case, insurance policy, whatever. I did not see the long-term fit, and he's not going to be a star. I think didn't Pop compare him last night, Tom, to Avery Johnson?
Yes.
In terms of just the presence,
giving everything he has every night in every way, shape.
Right. Like he doesn't kill you as a starting point guard, and I think there's a time not so long ago when I would have thought that he would have, but he's been a pleasant surprise and just kind of a steadying, kind of the perfect guy for what the Spurs are trying to do this year.
That assist to turnover ratio is always there with him. 8 assists last night, 1 turnover.
It was interesting Pop made the Avery comparison, because after the game in Philadelphia, I was talking to Keldon about Trey, and I was the one that brought up, like, it's a tough job, point guard for the Spurs. Like, you're following an all-star who followed an all-star, and Keldon, gave a great quote about how, he doesn't have to be Tony Parker or DeJounte Murray. And I almost asked Keldon, do you even remember Avery Johnson? Because that's who Trey kind of reminds me of the most in terms of Spurs point guards. But I did not. So it was surprising. It was interesting to me that Pop made that comparison a couple nights later.
You and Jeff McDonald and Greg Popovich on the same wavelength. There's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for, even though impending doom is just beyond the horizon, to appreciate the joy of today, the simple pleasures of victories over the Indiana Pacers and the Philadelphia 76ers and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Even though just a day from now it could all fall apart, just enjoy what you have while you have it. And we'll keep that same thing going here on the Spurs Insider podcast. Until the next time, take care of each other and keep it real.